Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for joining us. The topic of our webinar today is procedural matters and preparing for annual filings for non-investment fund reporting issuers. My name is Eden Williams, Manager, Regulatory Administration, and in my role, I oversee the financial examiners, insider reporting, prospectus receipting, applications, and exempt market intake. I'm pleased to have my team of review officers and administrators here to address some of the more frequently asked questions and continuing concerns respecting their specific areas of expertise. We'll send evaluation forms at the end of the session, and we'd appreciate your feedback on this format. We'll also be sending CPD certificates via the email after the session. Before we begin, I'd like to remind participants that the views expressed in this presentation are the personal views of the presenting staff and do not necessarily represent the views of the Commission or other Commission staff. The presentation is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or accounting advice. Information has been summarized and paraphrased for presentation purposes, and the examples have been provided for illustration purposes only. Responsibility for making sufficient and appropriate disclosure and complying with applicable securities law remains with the company. Information in this presentation reflects securities laws and other relevant standards that are in effect as of the date of the presentation. The contents of this presentation should not be modified without the express written permission of the presenters. The objective of the OSC SMEs Institute is to support small, medium, and medium-sized businesses in facilitating cost-effective compliance through issuer outreach and education. It is important for issuers to know securities regulatory requirements and to help them navigate the regulatory waters. The idea is that if we help issuers to better understand the disclosure requirements, they can focus their resources on building their company. Ultimately, we both have the same goal, for issuers to provide appropriate and meaningful information to investors. It is important to remember that at the end of the day, investor confidence in the information that companies provide is critical to the success of the company. We have a number of topics to cover today as outlined in this slide. We will start with how to file applications for exemptive relief. We will then move to filing a preliminary prospectus and then continuous disclosure documents, including annual and interim filings. We will also briefly touch on insider reporting, as we did a detailed presentation on insider reporting last year, which you can find on our OSC YouTube channel. Finally, we will talk about filing reports of exempt distribution. We've reserved some time for questions at the end of the presentation. You can submit questions at any time using the chat function in the webinar. However, please note that we'll be responding to questions at the end of the presentation. Our first presenter this afternoon is our Applications Administrator, who will walk you through the process of filing exemptive relief applications.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Madicott. As Eden mentioned, I'm the Applications Administrator at the Ontario Securities Commission. We will start by taking a look at exemptive relief applications and then move into pre-files and filing other documents through the OSC's general portal. If a company requires relief from a requirement of securities legislation, it may file an application for exemptive relief. For relief in multiple jurisdictions, a company should file an application under National Policy 11-203, Process for Exemptive Relief, Applications in Multiple Jurisdictions. Where relief is required in Ontario only, a company should file an application under OSC Policy 2.1, Applications to the Ontario Securities Commission. A passport application is one in which the relief is being sought in Ontario and at least one other jurisdiction. And the company's principal regulator is Ontario. It also includes an application where relief is being sought in at least two jurisdictions, but not in Ontario. For a passport application, the company files the application with and pays fees to the principal regulator. My co-presenters will be describing how a PR is selected in the next part of this presentation. A dual application is one in which the relief is being sought in Ontario and at least one other jurisdiction, and the company's principal regulator is not Ontario, and a company is seeking relief from a requirement that falls within the scope of Appendix D to MI 11102. There are also coordinated review and hybrid review applications, which are detailed more on this slide. Of course, if the company only requires relief in Ontario, it should file a local application under OSC Policy 2.1. Before making a formal application for exemptive relief or filing a preliminary prospectus, a company may wish to submit a pre-filing. The purpose of a pre-filing is to enable a company to consult with OSC staff regarding a specific issue before filing an application or prospectus. In the following slides, we will be going through the e-forms in greater detail. But first, we should cover some basic points, like where to file the applications. Generally speaking, exemptive relief applications and notices pursuant to Section 11.9 or 11.10 of NI 31-103 should use the application's e-form portal. Pre-filings have separate e-form portals depending on whether a particular filing is a prospectus pre-filing. Certain other documents, such as notices under Section 2.42 sub 2A of NI 45-106 may be filed on the general PDF submissions e-form or general portal. It is important to stress that if a paper filing is received, we will contact you to file the application or pre-file correctly online. An applicant should not send a paper copy of its online filing. Now, let's take a closer look at how to go about filing an exemptive relief application. All e-forms can be accessed through the OSC's electronic filing portal page on our website. When you get to the electronic filing portal screen, you will be presented with a list of the different e-forms available. The arrows on this slide indicate the e-form portals we'll be talking about today, namely applications, pre-filings for prospectuses or applications, and the general portal. We will begin with the applications e-form. Most exemptive relief applications should be filed here, including notices pursuant to Section 11.9 or 11.10 of NI 31-103. To access the form, click on the applications e-form link. You will arrive at the e-form, which we will go through step by step. As indicated at the top, all sections marked with a red asterisk are mandatory. First, you will have to indicate the name of the applicant or filer and select the type of applicant or filer. You can use the plus button on the right-hand side to add multiple applicants. You will also have to enter the total fees to be paid, which we will go over in a few minutes. After you've completed the applicant information, you will need to fill in the information about the application. In Part 1, you must indicate the legislation, instrument, and or section under which the application or notice is being filed. This can be selected from a drop-down menu. In Part 2, you must indicate the legislation or instrument from which relief or approval is sought. This can also be selected from a drop-down menu. In Part 3, you must indicate the section. This must be typed in manually. Note that you can use the plus buttons to request relief under and from multiple items. It is a good idea to refer to the application letter and draft decision document, which should contain this information. If confidentiality is being requested, it is important to remember to click the box on the e-form. Remember that the default selection is no. As the e-form notes, the reason for confidentiality must be included in the application letter. Notices under Section 11.9 or 11.10 of NI 31-103 are generally confidential. However, remember to still request confidentiality on the e-form, but the reason is not required. Next, you'll see the filing procedure section. Under filing procedure, please select the applicable option. NP 11-203 applies to passport, dual, coordinated or hybrid review applications. NP 11-206 applies specifically to the process for cease-to-be reporting issuer applications. NP 11-207 applies to revocations of failure to file cease trade orders in multiple jurisdictions. Ontario only should be selected if the relief is not required in any jurisdiction. If you have selected Ontario only, the other information in this section will not be available as it doesn't apply. Next, select the Principal Regulator and any other applicable jurisdictions where the relief would apply. For passport or dual applications, these jurisdictions should be mentioned in the application letter and draft decision document, referencing Section 4.71 of Multilateral Instrument 11-102. Finally, you'll have to select the appropriate multi-jurisdictional review type, if applicable. Please note that notices under Section 11.9 or 11.10 of NI 31-103 should be filed with the Principal Regulator only. Remember to select Ontario only for the filing procedure. If the application letter contains a request for an expedited review, remember to click yes on the form under Expedited Review Requested. The reason for the request should be included in the letter. The next section is where you are required to attach a PDF of the application or notice, a Word version of the draft order or decision document, and a PDF of any other supporting documentation, such as a verification statement. Note that for an 81-102 application filed on SEDAR, you must submit the Word version of the draft decision document by email to applications@osc.gov.on.ca. Finally, you will be required to fill out the contact information. Please ensure this information is accurate, particularly the primary email address, as it will be used to contact the filer about the application. If an NI 81-102 application is public, it must be filed on SEDAR NI 81-102 applications are made in connection with investment funds. Please note that confidential applications for relief pursuant to NI 81-102 must be filed through the application's eForm portal. Applications for relief to be evidenced by final prospectus receipt should be filed under the same project number and filing type as the prospectus on SEDAR. After you have completed the form, click Submit and you will be prompted to pay fees by credit card at the time of filing. If your fee is not paid at the time of filing, you will have to submit a check or wire transfer payable to the OSC. Also, if there is any additional amount owing after payment at the time of filing, payment must be made by check or wire transfer. Please remember to reference the submission ID number when submitting your payment. Application not otherwise listed in the fee bureau will generally fall under rows 01, 02, and 03 in OSC Rule 13502, Fees, Appendix C. The amount of fees owed depends in part on whether an applicant is seeking relief from one section of the relevant statute or related rules and regulation, or from two or more sections. The fee will be different if the applicant or certain other persons listed in row 03 of the fee rule are not subject to a participation fee. If you're applying for relief from the Commodity Futures Act, please refer to rows F1 to F3 in Appendix A of OSC Rule 13503, Commodity Futures Act fees. Now we'll briefly cover how to file on the general PDF submissions portal. Certain documents that are not filed on the application's eForm may be filed on this portal. This is what the general PDF submission portal looks like. The most critical part of this portal is correctly selecting both the filer category and type of document that you are filing. After selecting the document type, attach the PDF document and any other supporting documentation. Finally, you will have to complete the submitter contact information, much like the application's eForm. To avoid creating a duplicate filing, all revised or additional documents should be sent by email to the applications administrator at applications@osc.gov.on.ca. Thank you for listening. That wraps up my presentation on filing applications. At this point, I'm going to hand things over to the prospectus review officers, who will walk you through some of the more common issues encountered when filing prospectuses.
Thank you, David. My name is Evelina Barsukov. I'm a prospectus review officer. In this section, I, along with my colleague, Lorraine Greer, will go over the critical items required to file a preliminary prospectus. We will look at contents of the cover letter, certificates, timing issues, personal information forms, PIFS, and other filing requirements. Generally, we see two types of prospectuses, offering and non-offering. Offering prospectuses, in which securities are being offered to the public, are by far the most common. Within these types, there are two forms of prospectuses, long form and short form. There are also different procedures, provisions, and programs available, some of which may have special timing requirements. We will cover these later on in the presentation. For each prospectus filing, an issuer must have a principal regulator who will issue the receipt for the prospectus. The principal regulator must be one of the 8 specified jurisdictions noted on this slide. For the purposes of this presentation, we will be focusing on Ontario as the principal regulator. Generally, if the head office is in one of the specified jurisdictions, this jurisdiction will be the principal regulator. Please note, in determining your PR, you must use the head office location and not the registered office or mailing address location if they differ. If the issuer's head office is not in a specified jurisdiction or it does not yet have a PR, please refer to National Policy 11202, Section 3.4 to review the list of connecting factors to determine the issuer's PR. The first factor, where a connection is made to a specified jurisdiction, establishes the PR. In other words, the first hit is it. The passport system provides a single access point, so issuers offering in multiple jurisdictions can obtain a receipt from the principal regulator. Basically, in the passport system, you're only dealing with one principal regulator. However, in contrast to what Dave discussed with applications, where only one fee is paid, filings must be made and fees must be submitted in all applicable jurisdictions where the issuer is making the offering. If the PR is a specified jurisdiction that is not Ontario, and you're also filing in Ontario, this is also considered to be a dual prospectus. It means that the issuer will receive one receipt, which will evidence the decision of the OSC and act as a deemed receipt in each of the other jurisdictions where the prospectus was filed. If the principal regulator is the OSC and you're also filing in other jurisdictions, the OSC will review the prospectus. The OSC's receipt will trigger a deemed receipt in each other jurisdiction where the prospectus is filed. This is considered to be a passport prospectus. Now we're going to walk you through how to file a preliminary prospectus on SEDAR. First, you're going to start with selecting the category of the filer. For non-investment funds, this will always be Other Issuer. Then, you're going to move to the category of the filing, which will always be Securities Offerings. Next, you will select the filing type. This is where you would select whether it is a long form, short form, CPC, or other. Finally, you will select this document subtype. Now let's take a look at what these screens look like on SEDAR. The first image shows you what we talked about in the previous slide: the category of the filer, the category of the filing, and the filing type. After you click OK, you will be taken to the issuer cover page, the second image, where you will be able to select the subtype and type of documents you are filing. All italicized fields must be completed in order to submit the prospectus. Select page 2 to continue filling out the form. The information on page 2 should be entered in full and accurately. Ideally, all the information on the SEDAR issuer cover page should also be included in the cover letter delivered to the OSC. Lorraine will go through cover letters in further detail in the coming slides. If filed under the passport system, please indicate Multilateral Instrument 11102 Passport System and NP 11202 on SEDAR. Please note that all documents related to the prospectus filing must be filed under the same SEDAR project number. There are a number of documents that you should have prepared before filing a prospectus. This slide lists the documents that are required to be submitted with the prospectus filing. For more detail, refer to National Instruments 41101 Part 9 and 44101 Part 4. If you file a prospectus in Quebec, a French version of the prospectus, as well as documents incorporated by reference, are required to be filed. Before submitting the French version, scroll through the PDF copy on your screen to ensure the text is legible and that the dates and signatures are consistent with the English version. In some cases, the issuer may have an exemption from the requirement to file in French, which should be noted in the cover letter or prospectus. We require all documents to be accurate, complete, and current to avoid undue delays. In order for an issuer to be eligible to file a short form prospectus, the issuer must meet the short form requirements by first filing a notice of intention, at least 10 business days prior to filing its preliminary prospectus. The notice of intention is only required to be filed once and is effective until withdrawn. Filing this notice triggers an automatic change of the issuer status on the issuer's public SEDAR profile page. Short-form issuers must file a qualification certificate with each short-form prospectus. For further information, refer to Part 4 of National Instrument 44-101 and Section 2.3 of the Companion Policy of NI 44-101. Documents that are already filed on SEDAR and incorporated by reference must be filed in each jurisdiction where the prospectus is filed. It is helpful to have a reference in the prospectus to the filing date of the documents incorporated by reference, in addition to the date of the document. We encourage you to be fully aware of the difference between documents being filed and documents being delivered. Documents that are required to be filed with the Commission are generally available to the public. In contrast, there is no presumption that a document delivered to the Commission is public. For your reference, here's a chart showing the differences between what is required to be filed during the preliminary and final stages. Detailed cover letters should provide us with what comprehensive information about the filing is needed, which can help speed up the review process. Further, it will reduce your need for additional communication with the regulator. An ideal cover letter is generally comprised of the following 4 major components: basic information about the filing, previous dealings with regulators in relation to the filing, special circumstances, and enclosures. As I mentioned before, Lorraine is now going to do a deeper dive into cover letters.
Thank you, Evelina. My name is Lorraine Greer, and I am also a Prospectus Review Officer in the Corporate Finance Branch. First, the cover letter must contain the basic information about the filing, including the issuer's full name, which should match the name on SEDAR and on the prospectus itself. For instance, Real Estate Investment Trust should be spelled out if that is the full legal name of the entity. The same goes for corporation, limited, incorporated, and others. The type of prospectus, for example, long form or short form, the date of prospectus, which should be no more than 3 business days prior to filing, the location of the head office or connecting factors to the principal regulator if the head office is not in a specified jurisdiction, the jurisdictions where filing, the type of filing procedure if applicable. Next, you will want to detail any previous dealings with regulators in relation to the filing, such as details of any pre-files, exemptions relied upon or applied for, and other communication such as previous discussions with OSC staff. We encourage you to be specific and to attach any decision documents or outline the disposition of the related pre-file applications. The cover letter should also indicate if there are any other special considerations, which may include if the issuer is relying on the bought deal provision, or if the filing is an overnight marketed deal, or if there are any other special requests. For bought deals and overnight marketed deals, you should contact us as soon as possible so we can try to accommodate any special timing requests. Last but not least, the cover letter should have a list of documents accompanying the prospectus, including personal information forms, or PIFS, filed with the prospectus, and PIFS previously filed and where they were filed. We will talk about PIFS in more detail in a few minutes. Decision documents for exemptions, or any other relevant documents, such as material contracts or marketing materials. In the next few slides, we will walk through an example of what a good cover letter might look like. You'll notice that we have matched the colored triangles to the relevant sections. As you can see, the beginning of the letter contains all the basic information about the filing, starting with the name of the issuer and the type of the prospectus. Putting these details up front in the letter makes it much easier for us to identify the key facts about the filing. If there was a pre-file made that received a disposition, please provide details. You should disclose whether you have had any previous discussions with staff related to the filing. This is also where you would mention any special circumstances which might impact receipt timing, such as whether it is an overnight marketed deal or bought deal. Just as a reminder, if you need special accommodation, discuss this with the review officers prior to noon and prior to filing. Refer to OSC Staff Notice 41702 for more details. The final section of our sample cover letter shows a list of all PIFs submitted with the filing and where previously submitted PIFs can be found. We will go into more detail on PIFs in the next slide. Now we're going to talk more about PIFs. We only accept CSA PIFs in the form set out in National Instrument 41101 Appendix A, or in the form acceptable to the following exchanges: TSX, TSXV, and Equitas Neo. Whenever your prospectus requires a PIF submission, it should be one of the types of forms listed on this slide, together with the certificate and consent found in NI 41101 Appendix A. PIFs for all officers, directors, and promoters must be provided with the preliminary prospectus filing, unless they have been previously delivered. All PIF questions must have a response. Make sure that the certificate and consent attached to the PIF has been signed within 3 years of the date of filing of the preliminary prospectus. Also, ensure that the responses to questions 6 through 10 of the PIF are correct within 30 days of the filing of the preliminary prospectus. Any positive responses to questions 6 to 10 must be accompanied by an attached explanation of the events. The attachment must be initialed on each page by the individual named in the PIF. Please also make sure that the PIF contains the full name of the individual, no initials, and their current address. Unlike other documents submitted electronically, the signature at the bottom of the certificate and consent form must be a manual signature. Every prospectus must be certified. Certificates in the prospectus must comply with the applicable form requirements set out in this chart. In the next slide, we will discuss some of the common deficiencies we notice in prospectus certificates, which may result in delays in the review of your filing. Let's discuss some key points related to prospectus certificates. The date on the certificate should match the date on the face page of the prospectus. Also, the jurisdictions listed on the certificate should match the jurisdictions listed on the face page of the prospectus and the SEDAR filing page. Best practice is to keep the form and order of jurisdictions the same throughout all the submitted documents, including the marketing materials. Make sure the certificate language is correct and has the most current language. Finally, we will go over signatories and signature format in more detail the next few slides, because it is also one of the critical aspects to be met in order for the prospectus to be receipted in a timely fashion. In this first example, we are going to discuss the most commonly used signature format. Generally, issuer certificates must be dated and signed by the CEO, CFO, and 2 other directors. This slide shows you the correct signature format. Note that only typed signatures will be accepted. If we receive a prospectus with handwritten signatures, it will have to be refiled. In this second example, there are 3 signatures. Where the issuer has only 3 directors, 2 of whom are the CEO and CFO, the certificate must be signed by all 3 directors of the issuer. In this third example, there are 3 signatories but 4 signatures. As you can see, one person acts as the CEO and CFO and has signed in both places. Note that they have signed in each of their capacities. Generally, this format is reserved for Capital Pool Company or CPC prospectuses. Best practice is to include the full name of the signer, first and last. No nicknames or shortened names, please. Names with or without quotation marks are acceptable if preceded by the word signed. If signed is not before the name should be italicized in quotes. If the signer has 3 names, for example, John James Smith, it is preferable that all legal names are included in the signature. If you are filing a multi-jurisdictional prospectus, you are required to deliver a confirmation letter. The applicable confirmation can be found in National Policy 11202. The letter should confirm, among other things, that all the materials are filed or delivered in all jurisdictions. All fees have been paid in all jurisdictions. The issuer is in good standing and not cease-traded. The registration status of the underwriter, if one was used, and that it has signed the certificate in the prospectus. Note that items A, B, and C of the relevant section must be confirmed in all cases. The other items listed in the relevant provision as forming part of the confirmation may or may not be applicable in a particular case. These items should either be confirmed or noted as being not applicable. Please submit the confirmation letter as a separate document using the correct document type on SEDAR. Do not include the confirmation in the cover letter. If a prospectus is filed before noon, you can expect to be receipted the same day, assuming everything is in order. If the prospectus is filed after 12 noon, you can expect the receipt before noon on the next business day. This chart covers timing guidelines for prospectuses in general, as well as special accommodations provided for bought deals and overnight marketed deals. If you do require special accommodation in terms of timing, please email us as soon as possible. All requests for timing accommodation will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. If you plan to file a bought deal before 3 p.m., please email us before noon. As always, we encourage everyone to read the relevant staff notices. In this case, OSC Staff Notice 41702, Prospectus Practice Directive Number 1, for more detail. When paying your filing fees through SEDAR, select the appropriate prospectus type and fee code. Also, remember fees must be paid for each technical report incorporated directly or indirectly. We have provided another reference chart for the proper preliminary prospectus face page disclosure, or the red herring. Refer to the chart for the location of the specific language and formatting. Remember to be consistent when identifying jurisdictions in the red herring and certificate pages. That concludes our presentation on filing preliminary prospectuses. Remember that we are always here to help, and we appreciate if you communicate any questions or issues to us early in the filing process. Now we will hand the presentation over to our financial examiner group, who will cover continuous disclosure topics.
Thank you, Lorraine. My name is Cheryl Antonio. I am here with my colleague, Amy Fraser, and together with Andy Nguyen, we are the financial examiners. In this part of the presentation, we will cover continuous disclosure, or CD, obligations and related common filing issues. Specifically, we will be speaking about the timing requirements, the filing procedures, the implications of not filing on time, and the fees associated with annual and interim filings. Again, in this part of the presentation, we will only be speaking about the annual and interim filing requirements for non-investment fund issuers. Part 2 of National Policy 12203, Cease Trade Orders for certain continuous disclosure defaults, contains a definition of a specified requirement, which are the continuous disclosure documents that we look for from reporting issuers on an annual and quarterly basis. These documents are the annual and interim financial statements, annual or interim MD&A, annual information form, and certification of annual or interim filings. The deadlines for issuers' annual and interim filings are dependent on whether the issuer is a non-venture or venture issuer. The definitions of venture and non-venture issuer can be found in National Instrument 51102, Continuous Disclosure Obligations, or NI 51102. Generally speaking, non-venture issuers are required to file their audited annual financial statements within 90 days of their financial year end, and interim statements within 45 days of their quarter end. Venture issuers are generally required to file their audited annual financial statements within 120 days of their financial year end, and interim statements within 60 days of their quarter end. Part 4 of NI 51102 contains further details on these deadlines. For new reporting issuers, please refer to NI 51102, Part 4.7, for filing the first financial statements after becoming a reporting issuer. We encourage you to print out and keep a copy of this slide for your reference. When filing annual and interim financials, issuers are required to file certificates in accordance with National Instrument 52109, Certification of Disclosure and Issuers' Annual and Interim Filings, Part 4 and 5. As you can see from this slide, there are different forms of certifications for different filings. Ensure the correct certificates are filed. If you are refiling your financial statements, please use the certificates for refiled filings. These are denoted with an R at the end of the name, i.e. NI 52109F1R. All certificates should be in the prescribed format and dated with the same date that they are filed on SEDAR. Issuers are also required to pay participation fees and file a participation fee form on an annual basis. Specifically, a reporting issuer must pay its participation fee and file its participation fee form by the earlier of A, the date on which its annual financial statements for its previous financial year are required to be filed under Ontario securities law, and B, the date on which its annual financial statements for its previous financial year are filed. This means that if the annual financial statements are filed before they are due, the participation fee form must also be filed and the participation fee must be paid on the same date. For a more detailed breakdown of the filing due dates for each financial year end, please refer to the filing due dates calendar on the OSC website. If you encounter technical difficulties which prevent the timely transmission of an electronic filing, you may file the document in paper format under cover of SEDAR Form 3 no later than 2 business days after the date on which the electronic filing was required or permitted. Please see Section 3.1 of National Instrument 13101, System for Electronic Document Analysis and Retrieval, SEDAR, for the full details of the temporary hardship exemption. The next few slides describe the participation fees in more detail. This slide shows at a high level the different classes of reporting issuers which are subject to participation fees. For a complete definition of the classes of issuers, please refer to Part 1 of OSC Rule 13502, Fees. Each issuer must select the correct 13502 participation fee form for its classification. There are a number of key things to keep in mind when you are completing this form. The class of the issuer is based on their status as at the end of their previous financial year, not at the time of filing. On another note, please ensure you're filling out the correct form for Ontario participation fees. Some other jurisdictions have fee forms that look very similar to the OSC form. You will note on the participation fee form that it must be certified by an appropriate signing officer of the issuer. The management certification should be signed and dated. It should also include the officer's name and title. Class 1 and 3B issuers both use the same Form 13502F1. Therefore, please ensure that the correct type of reporting issuer class is selected. For a subsidiary that does not have an exemption from Rule 13502, a Form 13502F6 must be filed according to Part 2.4 of 13502, or late fees will apply. Also, the 5th trading period should not be completed unless the issuer has an extended financial year, such as in the case of a change in year-end. For issuers who have been halted or suspended, if there is no current closing price for the last day of a specified trading period, the last known closing price should be used. In other words, a share price of 0 is not acceptable. The late fee field included on the participation fee form is used to indicate the late participation fee, not any applicable late document fees. Late participation fees may apply if a company is late in paying its participation fee. The late participation fee is calculated as 0.1% of the unpaid portion of the participation fee for each business day the fee is unpaid. If the calculated late fee amount is less than $100, it is deemed to be nil and payment is not required. Note that there is no maximum amount for the late participation fee. Late document fees will also apply if the following documents are not filed on time: annual or interim financial statements, annual information forms for non-venture issuers, and Form 13502 participation fee forms. For each form or document required to be filed, the late document fee is $100 per business day, up to a maximum of $5,000 per calendar year. For more information, refer to Appendix D of OSC Rule 13502. Late fees are one of the penalties imposed when a filing is late. My colleague Amy will now discuss the other ramifications of not filing on time.
Thank you, Cheryl. My name is Amy Fraser, and I'm also a financial examiner at the OSC. A specified default occurs when a reporting issuer fails to file one or more of the specified requirements within the time period prescribed by securities legislation. The main way that the OSC will respond to a specified default is by issuing a failure to file cease trade order, also known as an FFCTO, which prohibits or restricts trading in or purchasing of securities of a reporting issuer. Alternatively, if a reporting issuer is aware that it may not be able to meet a filing deadline, the issuer can apply for a management cease trade order, also known as an MCTO, which prohibits or restricts trading in securities of a reporting issuer only by certain individuals, generally the CEO and CFO of the issuer. For more details, you may refer to the definitions in Multilateral Instrument 11103. If an issuer fails to file one or more of the specified requirements on time, it will immediately be noted in default on the OSC reporting issuer list, available publicly on our website. On or about the day of the default, an email notification is sent to the contact listed on the issuer's SEDAR profile, informing them that an FFCTO will be issued. This is the only notification the issuer will receive. We do not grant extensions on filing deadlines. The issuer will be sent a copy of the cease trade order, and the order will appear on the CSA National Cease Trade Order database. There are two different ways that an FFCTO can be revoked. If an issuer files the outstanding documents within 90 days of the date of the FFCTO, no formal application to revoke the FFCTO is necessary. The filing of the required documents constitutes the revocation application. However, late fees still apply and must be paid. If the issuer has been in default for more than 90 days, a formal revocation application under Section 144 of the Ontario Securities Act must be filed with the OSC via the applications portal on the OSC website. This application has an application fee associated with it, and again, any outstanding late fees must be paid. Please note that any CD filings that have subsequently become due must also be filed in order for the FFCTO to be revoked. Therefore, all required filings and fees must be up to date for the FFCTO to be revoked. We will now take a look at MCTOs. If an issuer knows that it will be late in submitting a required filing and it satisfies the eligibility criteria set out in Part 6 of National Policy 12203, it may apply for an MCTO. A formal application should be submitted to the OSC at least 2 weeks before the due date for the required filings, through the general PDF submission portal on the OSC website. There is no fee for an MCTO application. We will generally not consider an application for an MCTO that is submitted after the due date for the required filing. This slide sets out the contents of an MCTO application, as detailed in Part 3, Section 8 of National Policy 12203. Please make sure that the application is complete and contains as much detail as possible. Full PIFs are required to be filed with or referenced in the MCTO application. Our colleagues from the Prospectus group have already discussed PIFs and their acceptable forms in detail. You may make reference to a previously submitted PIF in the MCTO application if the consent was signed and dated within the last 3 years. Please include the SEDAR project number and submission number where the PIF can be found in your application. An issuer should be able to determine that it will be late in filing at least 2 weeks before the filing deadline. As soon as it makes this determination, the issuer should file a default announcement on SEDAR containing the information set out in Section 9 of National Policy 12203. To keep the market continuously informed of any developments during the period of the default, the issuer must file default status reports on SEDAR every 2 weeks following the default announcement. Generally, if an issuer doesn't comply with the alternative information guidelines, fails to remedy the default within 2 months from the date of the MCTO, or has subsequent defaults, the MCTO may be converted into an FFCTO. This concludes our discussion on filing defaults and cease trade orders. We often receive requests from issuers and SEDAR filers to make certain documents private on SEDAR. Generally, we will only make a document private on SEDAR if it has been filed on the wrong issuer profile, if the document contains confidential information that is potentially detrimental to the issuer, or if the document contains errors caused by redaction software. In order to request a document be marked private, you will need to complete a request form and send it to the financial examiners at finrepnotifications@osc.gov.on.ca. Please note that we will only consider requests to make CD documents private from those issuers whose principal regulator is Ontario. We cannot guarantee that your request will be approved immediately, as we require time to review each individual request and consult internally if necessary. If your request is denied, we recommend that you refile the document, including a note to reader on the face page or cover page of the document, explaining the reason for refiling. Please be reminded that making a document private on SEDAR does not mean that it has not already been disseminated in the public domain. Certain requests to mark a document private may require a formal application under Section 140, Sub 2 of the Ontario Securities Act. A fee is required for this application. Some documents filed under the other filing type on SEDAR, such as certain material contracts, are not automatically made public. If a document is filed on SEDAR under a document type that is private upon filing, and you would like it to be marked public, please send us a request by email. If the document is related to a prospectus filing, the request should be sent to our prospectus team. If the document is related to an investment fund issuer, the request should be sent to our investment funds branch. We remind issuers to please ensure that the information on their SEDAR profile is up to date. An issuer must update their SEDAR profile within 10 calendar days of any changes. In particular, the contact name and email address must remain current. This is the first point of contact used by the OSC when contacting an issuer. If a generic email address is provided on SEDAR, please make sure that someone is checking that email on a regular basis. We have noticed that changes to an issuer's auditor are often not reflected on the SEDAR profile. The profile should be updated at the same time as filing the change in auditor notice. Some other profile updates to keep in mind are included on this slide. We would like to remind you that the Financial Examiner Group cannot provide legal or accounting advice, and we do not review draft documents prior to filing on SEDAR. Thank you for listening to our part of the presentation. I will now hand it over to Elizabeth Henry, our Insider Reporting Review Officer.
Thanks, Amy. My name is Elizabeth Henry. My colleague Fahad Anjum and I are Insider Reporting Officers at the OSC. I will be covering some common issues with insider filings. Before we start, we'd like to remind you that last year we did an in-depth presentation on how to set up profiles and file on SEDI. You can watch the presentation on the OSC YouTube channel. In this presentation, we will focus on common issues that we continue to see on a regular basis. In essence, reporting insiders have access to material, non-public information, and therefore has disclosure obligations to the OSC. For your reference, you can find a definition of a reporting insider in National Instrument 55-104, Part 1. Anyone that falls under the definition is required to file insider reports on SEDI. Of course, when it comes to actually completing the filings, many insiders rely on agents. The first point that we'd like to go over has to do with updating profiles on SEDI. Issuer profile supplements contain certain information about the issuer, particularly relating to its outstanding securities and financial instruments. It is very important that the profile contain the most up-to-date information. Profile supplements should be filed immediately after any information has changed. If you are also filing on SEDAR for an issuer and keeping the SEDAR profile up to date, you should also ensure that the issuer SEDI profile reflects any changes that are made. When a new insider files insider report for an issuer, SEDI will send a notification to the person that is listed as the insider affair contact for that issuer. Therefore, it is important to keep that information current as well. That covers the issuer profile supplement. Now let's talk about insider profiles. An insider might choose to provide additional contact information. This could be another address at which they prefer to be contacted, such as a business address, or they may provide contact information for an agent who is to be contacted by the regulators instead of the insider. Without this information, staff may contact the insiders themselves instead of the agent, which can create confusion and delay the resolution of issues. It is important that the insider profile remains up to date, which means amending it when necessary as detailed on the slide. Change to an insider name, address, relationship to an issuer, or if they cease to be an insider, must be updated within 10 days. All other changes must be updated at the time of the next filing. We also noticed that some insiders are not amending their profile on SEDI after they are no longer required to report. Please remember to update. You must amend your insider profile using the Add or Amend Issuer Information button to indicate the date you cease being an insider of the issuer. As an agent, if you are made aware that a person has ceased to be an insider of an issuer, please update the profile immediately. There is a detailed demonstration on how to cease reporting in last year's presentation. It is important that when an agent is no longer filing for an insider, the insider should contact the CSA help desk to have their access key reset. As an agent, if you are no longer filing for an insider, we recommend that you request a user account deletion. An issuer grant report is a report filed by an issuer on SEDI that publicly discloses the detail of compensation arrangement under this grant of stock options are made to the insiders. If a grant report has been filed, the insider can rely on the exemption and file up to 30 days after the end of the year. These reports must be filed by the issuer within 5 days of the grant for the insiders to be able to rely on the exemption under Part 6 of NI 51-104. Insiders cannot rely on the exemption when grant reports are not filed. Grant reports are not mandatory, but there can be confusion when the insider or agent think they can rely on the exemption and the report hasn't actually been filed. Now, we'll go over some other common issues that we see in insider report filings. First, the date of the transaction should refer to the trade date, not the settlement date. Also, please remember that late filings are subject to late fee as detailed in OSC Rules 13502 Appendix D at $50 per calendar day up to a yearly maximum of $1,000 per insider per issuer per fiscal year. When submitting payments, please remember to include the insider number, the invoice number. For issuers, if a security designation is no longer issued and no securities are outstanding, use the archive security designation featured on SEDAR and remove the designation from the reporting issuer list of outstanding securities. Again, a detailed walkthrough on how to add and update security designation can be found in last year's SME presentation. Please note, on this slide, we outline some of the circumstances under which staff would not recommend waiving late fees. Of course, if there has been a filing error or there's a legitimate reason for being late, your waiver request, staff are more likely to recommend granting the waiver. That concludes the insider reporting section of the presentation. I'll now pass things over to Evan.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Liz. My name is Evan Marquis, and I am the Review Officer for the Exempt Market within the Corporate Finance Branch. Today, I'll be walking you through some key topics relating to the exempt market, including timing requirements, fees, including late fees, how to file, saving drafts and submitting amendments, the offering memorandum exemption, general PDF submissions, and common form errors. Generally, exempt market securities issued in Canada are exempt from the prospectus requirements and are subject to less disclosure, have lower costs to raise capital, and can do so in shorter periods of time. These securities generally are described or found in National Instrument 45-106. This market is accessed by both domestic and international issuers and by both public and private companies. There is a combination of large institutional investment interest and qualified individual investors in this marketplace. Investors who buy securities through prospectus exemptions generally do not have the benefit of ongoing information about the security that they are buying or the company selling it. As well, they often do not have the ability to easily resell the security. While the filing of a prospectus is generally not required for an exempt distribution, there are other requirements that may apply, including the need for an issuer to file a report of exempt distribution in the form of 45-106-F1. The Exempt Market Review Desk is often asked about timelines for filing reports of exempt distribution. Pursuant to NI 45-106, Part 6, the form must be filed no later than 10 days after the distribution date. To calculate the 10 days, start counting on the day after the date of the first distribution. Investment fund issuers may have different timing requirements that we won't be discussing today. The focus here is on non-investment fund issuers filing in Ontario. One form can be used to report on multiple exempt distributions that occur within a 10-day period. If additional distributions are made outside the period, another form or forms will be required, each covering no more than a 10-day period. If the 10th day is a weekend or a public holiday in Ontario, the filing would be due on the next business day in Ontario. Occasionally, public holidays in Ontario are different than other provinces. Please note that the due dates and times of submissions are calculated in Ontario time or Eastern Standard Time. The illustration on this slide indicates a sample distribution period with a first distribution date or start date of October 2nd and an end date of October 12th. We start counting the 10-day period on October 3rd. October 12th is the 10th day after the specified start date, and filers must file the form by this day. If the report was filed on October 13th in this example, the submission would be 1 business day late and would be subject to late fees, which will be discussed in subsequent slides in more detail. The illustration on this slide indicates a start date or first distribution date of October 4th. 10 days from this date would be October 14th. However, because the 10th day falls on a weekend, the filing would then be due on the next business day in Ontario, which is October 16th. In this same example, suppose a second distribution date of October 12th existed. In this case, it can be included in the same report as the second distribution is within 10 days of the first distribution. The filing due date is calculated from the first distribution date or start date indicated on the form. If a third distribution took place on October 17th, it would need to be captured in a separate report of exempt distribution. The OSC fee rule provides information regarding late fees applicable to the late filing of certain documents in Appendix D, columns A and B, specifically for the Form 45-106-F1 at Item C. Fees are $100 for every business day following the date the form is required to be filed by a person or company until the date the form is filed, to a maximum of $5,000 for all forms required to be filed by the person or company in the calendar year. We prefer that our filers wait for their late fee letter before sending payment for any late fees owing. Before you proceed to file your form, we encourage you to read through the important information on the Exempt Market webpage. A link to the page is on the next slide. Simply click on each tile to learn more. The fillable e-form can be accessed from the OSC main page via the Quick Links section under the OSC's electronic filing portal. It can also be accessed from the Exempt Market page. Select non-investment fund or investment fund as applicable. Again, the focus of this presentation is on non-investment fund filers. A calendar wizard will pop up upon clicking into the date field. It will not allow a distribution period that exceeds 10 days after the start date. The distribution period entered at Item 7F of the form should align with the dates entered upon launching the form. Again, the calendar wizard in the form will not allow you to select a range beyond 10 days after the start date. A red box will indicate that you need to adjust the field in order to conform with the requirements. Additionally, the form will not allow you to enter an end date that occurs into the future. If there is only one distribution date, the start date and end date can be the same. Once you have entered a valid distribution period, a link to the online form will appear. Click this to launch and begin entering your form data. Before doing so, however, it is recommended that you consult the instructions link above the link to the form. Here, a detailed set of instructions and useful tips provide guidance on a number of key topics, many of which are covered in this presentation. We won't be doing a detailed walkthrough of the form in this presentation, however, we will highlight key segments. If you are filing a new report, select New Report. If an error was made when you initially filed the form, you must file an amended form by selecting Amended Report in Item 1 of the e-form. You must reference the original submission ID or EDR number in the box provided to the right. Note that if you are filing a second amendment, the first amendment will then be entered in this box as the submission being amended. Please do not select New Report when filing an amended submission. Generally, there are no activity fees required for an amendment, but if you change the distribution dates, additional fees may apply. There is also a comment field that allows you to explain what is being amended vis-a-vis your previous submission. In the event that the amendment was not requested by corporate finance staff, these comments are particularly helpful in terms of identifying why the amendment is being submitted. In October 2017, the OSC enhanced the Save Draft functionality for the Form 45-106-F1. Click on the Save Draft button located at the upper right corner of the e-form to save a copy at any time. Enter the name of the issuer or underwriter for whom the submission is being filed in the appropriate field. When you first save the e-form, a link to the saved draft will be emailed to you. This link will remain active for 30 days. However, once you have actually filed, the link will only be available for 14 days from the date of submission. This new feature will prevent filers from having to re-enter form data again and reduces the potential for new errors on amendment in the event that one is requested. However, note that only one amendment can be made within the 14 days. A second amendment will require you to re-enter the form data. You can print or save a copy of the e-form or email the link to others for review. In order to receive an email link to your draft e-form, simply enter the issuer or underwriter name as well as your email address and click Send me the link. Once you save your draft, you will receive an email which looks like the example in this slide. We recommend that you flag or file this email for ease of reference in the event that you need to amend your form or schedule data within the 14-day period following the submission date. Corporate finance staff will not be able to send you a hyperlink to your draft form. Generally, each original report of exempt distribution requires payment of a $500 activity fee. This is set out in Appendix C of the OSC fee rule. If you are unable to pay by credit card when the report is submitted, you must pay by check or wire transfer. When sending payment by check, we ask that you include a copy of the fee letter, EDR number, and the correct issuer or underwriter name of the entity certifying the report. If you must pay by wire transfer, the fees administrator can send you detailed instructions. Note that your wire transfers are subject to an additional bank fee. The OM exemption was designed to facilitate capital raising by allowing issuers to solicit investments from a wider range of investors that they would be able to under other prospectus exemptions, providing certain conditions are met. Issuers are required to file a current OM with the OSC on or before the 10th day after the first distribution when using the OM exemption for an Ontario distribution. Marketing materials used in the context of an offering made in reliance on the OM exemption must also be filed with the OSC. However, there is no need to file this documentation again after subsequent closings unless there is a change to these materials. Both the OM and marketing materials can be attached or referenced with the report of exempt distribution at item 7H on the form. Additionally, these materials can be filed by the OSC's electronic filing portal under the appropriate document types. These document types are mentioned in subsequent slides. If you choose to reference your documentation at item 7H, select a document type from the dropdown, enter a date, indicate whether it was previously filed, then enter an EDR number in the case of a prior report of exempt distribution, or a GEN number in the case of a prior general PDF submission. Issuers utilizing the OM exemption should take note that any amount raised under the OM exemption in Ontario that exceeds $2 million will be subject to additional activity fees. This is set out in the fee rule at Appendix C. The example here for ABC Capital Inc. indicates that $2.6 million was raised under the OM exemption in Ontario. Consequently, 0.025 of that amount is equal to $650, and this represents the total activity fee owing. If the company paid their standard $500 activity fee upon filing, an additional amount of $150 would be owed. The fees administrator will issue a fee letter for the appropriate amount. Companies that use the OM exemption in Ontario have ongoing disclosure requirements and must deliver financial statements annually to the OSC. Generally, an issuer must deliver annual financial statements within 120 calendar days after the financial year end to the OSC. Issuers should review Section 2.9 of NI 45-106 for complete information about the deadlines pertaining to the filing of annual financial statements. If an issuer has changed their financial year end, they must also file a notice of change in financial year end. Additionally, a notice of use of proceeds, Form 45-106 F16, is required. This can be found on the Exempt Market webpage under the Forms and Filing Requirements heading. OM exemption users must file their annual financials on time. Late annual financial statements are subject to late document fees. The OS fee rule provides information regarding late fees applicable to the late filing of certain documents in Appendix D, Column A and B, specifically for annual financials at Item A. Fees are $100 for every business day following the date the form was required to be filed by a person or company until the date the form is filed, to a maximum of $5,000 for all forms required to be filed by the person or company in the calendar year. Note this annual cap is independent of the cap for issuers and underwriters and their late Form 45-106 F1 submissions. General document submissions can be made through the General PDF Submissions section of the OSC's electronic filing portal. Under the PDF Submissions section heading, click the Here hyperlink in order to access the fillable form template. Exempt market filers may file various types of documents as general submissions. This slide captures some of the more common document types. Importantly, for OM exemption issuers, note that there are two different categories for each of annual financial statements and notices of use of proceeds under Section 2.9. Although these are filed concurrently, they should be filed separately under the appropriate document types. We're now going to discuss some of the common form compliance errors and hopefully provide some clarity regarding how to enter key data fields correctly. Perhaps the most common and confusing error is regarding the total number of unique Ontario purchasers. Item 7F of the form requires the number of purchasers vis-a-vis the jurisdiction and exemption entered and on an overall total number of unique purchasers. The best practice here is to count each purchaser only once in each row on the form, as opposed to simply counting the number of transactions or purchases listed on Schedule 1, which may include multiple items for the same individuals. Note that the form fields ask for purchasers and not purchases or transactions. For example, John Smith, an Ontarian, makes 3 separate purchases under the accredited investor exemption within the same report of exempt distribution and appears 3 times on Schedule 1. If no other purchasers were on the report, the number of purchasers field at Item 7F for Ontario and the accredited investor exemption would indicate 1. And the total number of unique purchasers would likewise be 1. Another common form deficiency is regarding the aggregate Ontario distribution or purchase amount. Ultimately, the amounts reported on Schedule 1 should align with information reported at Item 7F on the form. Common mistakes here are often a result of omitting or adding extra Ontario purchasers in Schedule 1, counting a purchaser total from a jurisdiction other than Ontario on the form, or omitting the purchase amounts in either the form or the Schedule 1. Entering inconsistent distribution dates is another common error made by filers. As mentioned in previous slides, issuers are able to enter a 10-day distribution period as a maximum. In many cases, the first distribution or start date and end date will be the same. In either case, though, the information entered at Item 7B on the form must be consistent with the Schedule 1 distribution dates for Ontario purchasers recorded in Column M. In other words, the dates reported on Schedule 1 shall not precede the start date nor go past the end date provided at Item 7B. There are fee implications here, as each 10-day distribution period requires a separate report and activity fee. Occasionally, filers will omit an exemption on either the form at Item 7F or on the Schedule 1, and consequently, the information won't match. Simply put, the total number of unique Ontario purchasers relying on a particular exemption must correspond with those same exemptions on the form. In certain circumstances, other may be selected on Schedule 1. For example, Section 2.24 of NI 45-106 doesn't exist under the Column Q dropdown and would be a valid option under Other if properly specified in Column R. Similarly, Other should then be selected on the form with a note referencing the particular exemption relied on. Corresponding exemption subsections are also required in the case of Section 2.3 or Section 2.5 as indicated in the color-coded figure on this slide. If applicable, it is also required for Section 2.9 for eligible investors. All of the purchaser information should be entered in each row, if applicable. If an address field, province code, subsection, or security code was omitted, you will need to amend your submission to provide missing information. Be sure to enter individuals using the family name and given name fields as opposed to the non-individual name field. If there are joint purchasers, simply use an ampersand to denote this relationship within the same row to separate the names. For example, Jones and Smith and Jane and Robert. Do not commingle account level details or other unnecessary information within the personal or non-individual name fields. Best practice here is to enter only the legal name of the beneficial owner. In some cases, the beneficial owner name is not required. Guidance on entering beneficial owner information can be found in CSA Staff Notice 45-308 at item 20. A link is provided at the end of this presentation. If an underwriter is completing and certifying a report of exempt distribution, the name and, if applicable, NRD number must be entered at item 4. Similarly, if direct compensation is provided in connection with the distribution, item 8 must be completed. If the compensated party is a registrant, a valid NRD number must be provided. In order to avoid having to amend your original submission, please ensure that the correct NRD number corresponds to the proper registrant name. Common errors are often a result of extra or inverted digits in the NRD number fields. Note that adding extra zeros or entering an incorrect NRD number may link a different existing or future registrant to the filing. A negative response to the registrant indicator is acceptable if the person is exempt from registration or is otherwise not a registrant according to the most recent or current NRD records. Another common error or omission is regarding the issuer name. As indicated at item 3 on the form, we expect the full legal name to be entered accurately. This name should be identical to the name entered at the top of Schedule 1 and, if applicable, Schedule 2. It is also important to include the certification date on Schedule 1. On occasion, we receive invalid or outdated versions of schedules attached to current reports of exempt distribution. Filers must use the current Canadian Securities Administrators approved version of Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Hyperlinks to each of Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 can be found directly below the link to file a Form 45-106-F1 on the Exempt Market webpage. The content of these templates and columns should not be altered or manipulated in any way, including the sheets or tabs at the bottom. If you utilize an invalid template or manipulate the content of the schedule, you will be asked to file an amended submission with the correct template. We recognize that issuers and service providers will experience technical issues from time to time. We want you to know that we are here to help troubleshoot and resolve these issues in order to facilitate successful electronic submissions in a timely manner. You can reach out to our contact center as a first point of contact either by telephone or email. If necessary, electronic submissions of the form and schedules can be made to the Exempt Market and e-filings email addresses, but they will need to be filed through the portal once the technical issues are resolved. That concludes the main topics of today's presentation.
Great. I'd like to thank David, Evelina, Lorraine, Cheryl, Amy, Elizabeth, and Evan for sharing their expertise with us today. Before we proceed to the Q&A, I'd like to draw your attention to the appendix in our slide decks, which contains useful references relating to today's topics, as well as general contact information and contact information for today's presenters. So thank you so much for joining us, and please stay online for the Q&A, which will begin shortly.